Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This episode, we'll be talking, well, a full MLS Cup preview, UCL roundup, World Cup packing, eliminating offside, USC homecoming, all quiet on the Western Front, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this Wednesday, November 2nd in the year 2022?
I am doing well, and I want to begin today's show by wishing a happy birthday to our former producer, Frances Silva, although she's married now, so it's Frances something else. But
we'll always consider her Frances Silva.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Fran.
Yeah.
She does wonderful things. Fran Arthur, for the record there. She does wonderful things and has for a long time. You know, we've talked about her over the years, and she was with us, then she was not with us, and now she's back with us, and we are better for it. So happy birthday to her. Did you watch anything interesting?
No, as I told you, I'm in a bit of a holding pattern now.
Right.
But you, it sounds like, might have
something. I did watch the new All Quiet on the Western Front, which is on Netflix. It's a German film in German, and then you can subtitle it or you can dub it depending on what you want. I actually watched the dub version, which was pretty good, actually. And, you know, as is the case, as technology advances, the ability to make things more and more realistic advances, right? And so all of these war movies now, they are so realistic and so terrifying in their realism right now. And this is another one, you know, the Dunkirks and all those different movies that I know you have watched. And this is another one that would probably be right up your alley in terms of the historical significance, how much it sticks to the book and doesn't. I've read some articles where, you know, people are concerned that it deviates here and there, but it is another harrowing type of war movie. And again, the cinematography is incredible, and the way that the war is depicted is incredible in its, you know, just brutal and devastating physical and emotional and psychological effects on the soldiers and everybody involved. But it's mostly out on the battlefield almost entirely, and it's very, very well done. It's not the greatest war movie I've ever seen, but it kept my attention for the 2.5 hours I think that it ultimately was. So maybe you check that out. I know you're on a holding pattern.
I do have the last episodes ever of Atlanta. That's going to be my final TV engagement with Qatar. So that's coming up. So looking forward to that. This is the final season, and we've only got a couple of episodes left. All
right. Well, as we mentioned earlier in this week, we are in the midst of MLS Cup week, and there's all sorts of festivities, and obviously it's in our hometown here in Los Angeles. So ready to light the candle?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, let's start off with a little deeper MLS Cup preview than earlier in the week. As we know, LAFC hosting the Philadelphia Union, 4 p.m. Eastern time on Big Fox. All of us will be out there at the bank downtown in Los Angeles, a sold-out stadium for what promises to be, you know, hopefully a very entertaining and interesting game between what is not, I even think arguably at this point, the two best teams in Major League Soccer. And as we said before, the two number one seeds, if you will, finally facing off against each other after almost a 20-year span where that has not happened. So delectable on the surface, and so many different things to talk about. We talked a little bit about this, but I want to get a little bit more into it because all finals, and I guess all sports, come to be defined, right, and framed as such. And this one, I think rightfully so, is going to be about what Philadelphia is and what LAFC is, and that juxtaposition between the two, and how differently they approach their soccer on the field and their philosophy off the field of the club. And so the whole David and Goliath, in this case, LAFC being the Goliath, and obviously Philadelphia being David, the elites versus the working class, if you will, Philadelphia punching above their weight, the little engine that could, and LAFC, that shiny super club paid for with incredible celebrity ownership and high spending, style over substance, all that kind of stuff. That is going to be how it is going to be framed. And as we found out this week, that the Philadelphia Union are leaning into that heavily in an effort to gain any possible advantage. General thoughts on, is that the framing, and is that a fair framing?
I think it's a fair framing, and I actually put together a graphic today that is going to air on our pregame show on Saturday that you're going to be talking over exactly that, comparing how many homegrowns each team has, how many designated players, what their payroll is. And yeah, the differences are stark. I am trying to ascertain whether Christian Teo counts as a designated player. Believe it or not, that's proven more difficult than I imagined. I'm putting a lot of faith in Tom Bogert because it's an article of his that I'm ultimately going with to determine yes or no.
He's a smart man. I would have no problem trusting him. So,
but yeah, in terms of the payroll, I mean, LAFC's is twice as. I don't want to give away the graphic we're going to air on, but yeah, and Philadelphia has twice as many homegrown players.
Listen, if people listen to this show, okay, if they take the time to subscribe to our show, we should be able to give them a little peek behind the scenes, and I think we do. I think we're not giving away what's going to happen on the show, but if you are loyal subscribers and listeners and watchers to this show, you do get a peek behind the curtain, and that's a good thing. That's one of the benefits of being part of the State of the Union. So that's good. I mentioned that Philadelphia is leaning into the little engine that could, right? So much so that their social media folks this week pulled out a clip from they have receipts, I think the kids call them, of me mid-season. I don't know when it was, in the middle of the season, talking about probably May or so, right? Talking about the Philadelphia Union, and in this clip, I say that they are not a great team yet. Well, we know in this day and age, all it takes is someone to say something critical of somebody else, and it can be weaponized and used, and that's what the Philadelphia Union have done. They tweeted it out and said, "This was a bad take, but it's not your worst take yet." And this only tells me that they are desperate and that I'm living in their head among many, many teams and people out there right now. So this warms the cockles of my redheaded heart to see that the Philadelphia Union are having to resort to this tactic to motivate themselves. And the check is hopefully in the mail for yet another team that I am being used to motivate.
I saw the clip, and it was from our post-game show after a game against NYCFC in late June, in which their trainer, Paul Rushing, infamously came on the field and mixed it up with the NYCFC players. And it was after that game, I believe Rob Stone asked you about NYCFC and Philadelphia, which one of these teams is a true MLS Cup contender, and you said NYCFC, yes, Philadelphia, not so much. And I think they're making a lot of hay out of that.
As they should. And if I was in their position, I would do the exact same thing. And so you can't really laminate a clip like this, but for those that know the receipts that have been kept from a Cincinnati perspective and others out there, get in line.
I did hear from a Phillies fan on Twitter, because you might recall I said Astros in 5, and that's no longer possible.
What are they at now?
Phillies are playing much better than I expected in this series. They're up 2-1.
It's a Philadelphia year, Mosse.
Yeah,
it's a Philadelphia year. So we'll see how it goes. They have, I think as we record this on Wednesday, the Philadelphia Union have made their way across the country to get ready.
I will say, though, in terms of the soccer that the two teams actually played this season, Philadelphia is not any underdog. They were a juggernaut and scored goals for fun and finished with a much better goal difference than LAFC, the same amount of points. So I understand the framing in terms of the general manner in which the two franchises operate, how the rosters were constructed, but just in terms of on the field watching them play this season, this to me is a clash of heavyweights.
It is. However, I do feel that LAFC from a depth perspective may have a little bit more in the tank and certainly more to go to. And look, I don't know if Bale is a liability even at this point, but it's still, you have Bale sitting, I think, we don't know, but sitting on the bench this week, and it's not a bad substitute to have. And Chiellini, we know he starts, he doesn't start, it doesn't really change the outcome.
Yeah, the two injury questions would be Chiellini, and they're not sure about Segura either, so it might be Ibeaga. And then with Philadelphia, obviously Bedoya, who I don't think is going to try again. I expect it to be Jack McGlynn, who, by the way, would be the second youngest starter in MLS Cup history, behind only Aiden Morris a couple years ago with Columbus. McGlynn would actually surpass Landon Donovan from 2001. You mentioned, by the way, this being the first final between two number one seeds since 2003, Chicago-San Jose. Jim Curtin played in that game for Chicago, so there's some neat connections there.
It's full circle. Oh, by the way, I should clean up something about from a couple podcasts before ago that I said about Jim Curtin. I will also tell the story and here's another peek behind the curtain. If you tune in on Saturday to MLS Cup, you'll probably hear the real version of this story. So a couple podcasts ago, I think I mentioned that I traded jerseys with Jim Curtin because he had wanted my jersey when he first came into the league. At the time, I was playing for the Galaxy, and I was an old veteran running around, and he had wanted my jersey. My wife is an elephant, okay? She remembers absolutely everything, and she is very useful at times. And so she has reminded me that was not the case, actually. What ended up happening was Jim Curtin came into the league, and for those that don't know Jim Curtin, he looks much more clean-cut than he did when he came to the league. When he came into the league, he had a much more froey, big, bushy hairdo and stuff like that. And my wife immediately fell in love with this player that she was being forced to watch as I was, watching games and stuff like that. And she said, "Who's that kid?" And I love him and all this kind of stuff. And so in knowing that my wife was such a big Jim Curtin fan, right when he burst on the scene, at the end of the game where the Los Angeles Galaxy was playing against the Chicago Fire, I actually went up to Jim Curtin and asked for his jersey in order to give it to the love of my life, my wife, who had obviously fallen head over heels for this young Jim Curtin as a player. So that is evidently the story. And I, in my egotistical way that I do, thought that he had wanted my jersey, and it's actually the complete opposite.
Although, for all we know, his wife might be a fan of yours.
She may know that. She may be. There are wives out there, I'm sure, somewhere out there that are fans of me. But listen, Jim Curtin against Steve Cherundolo, we have talked, and we will continue to talk about how good both of these guys have been in very, very different ways and in very, very different circumstances and scenarios that they have coached under. But both of them have obviously been successful. The only reason, again, that it's happening in Los Angeles is because the Los Angeles LAFC have, in the course of the season, won more games than Philadelphia, and that is the first tiebreaker when it comes to Major League Soccer. And that's what they're going to continue to do. How do you see this ultimately playing out on the field? You had something, I can see your face. You had something to say.
No, you mentioned in your opening USC homecoming. I'm wondering when you're going to get to that element of...
Well, because later on in the show, my friend, but good tease there. All right, we do have something where a friend of ours is talking about the MLS Cup final and a USC homecoming. So I am going to save that, but we're not giving anything away in that USC homecoming and a USC game is happening at the exact same time that the MLS Cup is happening. So that's so MLS. All right, on the field, ultimately, how do you think this plays out?
I lean Union.
Do you really?
Yes.
Why? Just because you love the little engine that could, and everybody's against us, and it's us against the world, and come on.
I just think it's their year.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, to your point, the Union, and they've actually said this, they don't look at themselves as underdogs by any stretch of the imagination, other than, I would think, playing at home, there is a significant advantage. In this case, I'm still going to go with LAFC. The wonderful thing is, Mosse, that we did the calculation this morning. Of the 26 MLS Cups, 13 different MLS teams have won MLS Cup. All right, and we know that this is a league that is built from a system perspective on competitive balance and parity out there, and they have gotten that. They have achieved that relative to most every other league in the world, where you have your haves and the have-nots. And once again, on Saturday night, we are going to have the 14th, yet another team that has never won an MLS Cup. Both of these coming at it in very, very different ways. I am going to stick with my prediction of LAFC, a 3-1 prediction in that it's 2-1 down the end. Philadelphia is just pouring on the pressure and risking, and therefore that space in the back opens up. They get that third kind of open net goal, if you will, from a hockey reference, and it ends up 3-1.
One stat in your favor is that it's been since 2012 that the higher seed has hosted MLS Cup, so we've had 10 such MLS Cups, and the only outright victory by a visitor was 2015 Portland at Columbus. There were two others on penalties, Seattle, Toronto 2016, NYCFC last year against Portland. But yeah, I mean, home field advantage does matter in these games.
It did, and keep in mind that Portland, that's the Valeri one where he picked off the ball at the very beginning there, if I'm not mistaken. So something crazy happened in that, and barring something crazy, which certainly can happen, it's going to be a fun night. we're all going to be out there. We will all be on site for this game, and that includes Kendra de St. Alban and Stu Holden, and obviously John Strong and Rodolfo Landeros and Marisa Dew, everybody behind the scenes. Am I missing anybody there? I think that's everybody. So we will be doing that game. And all right, so do you have a score prediction? Because I gave my score prediction, so you should do that.
I'll go 2-1 Philadelphia.
2-1 Philadelphia. All right, before we move on to some Champions League, also congratulations are in order to Hani Mukhtar from Nashville SC, the MLS MVP for 2022. Certainly well worth the votes that he got. As we know, I did not vote for him ultimately because of my calculation, but I have no problem with Mukhtar being the MLS MVP. You?
I don't. I do want to say I saw that MLS put out a best 11 for this season today, and it is an absolute joke. Not that any of the players aren't great, but the formation, it's basically 3 defenders and then 8 attacking players.
Why don't you like to play attacking soccer? Why?
Listen, I've always said with these best 11s, you can take some liberties with positions, but you can't be completely farcical about it. It still has to be some semblance of a team. France football a couple of years ago put together an all-time best 11 in soccer history, and they had Pele and Maradona as wingbacks. So there are instances where you cross a line to me. Are you looking at it right now?
So let's go here. So Andre Blake in goal. All right, you don't have a problem with that, right?
Yeah.
You don't want 2 goalkeepers, right?
No, it's fine.
Okay, 1 goalkeeper is good for you. All right, so the back 3 that you're all up in arms about is Kai Wagner on the left-hand side, no problem, right? Jacob Glesnes, both from Philadelphia Union, and then Walker Zimmerman, right?
Yeah.
So those are your 3 in the back. If you were playing at a 3 in the back, if you're so inclined, you okay with that?
That's not crazy.
You're okay. So now we go to the quote-unquote midfield, right? Gazdag, Mukhtar, Driussi, and Acosta. Not a lot of defense being played there, right? So you better have the ball a lot, okay? So you have any problems with the players there, or the personnel, or the?
Again, it's not all of those players are great, but I'm just saying it's a ridiculous lineup construction, and then there's still 3 more forwards.
Wait, are you saying it's ridiculous because there's nobody to play defense? Nobody would actually tackle. Nobody would really do anything other than when you have the ball?
We ought to recognize some of the defensive midfielders that had great seasons, and that position doesn't count. You're allowed to just put.
Listen, I am obviously a former. Well, you're never a former. I'm a defender, right? I see the beauty and the value to it, but I'll be the first person to tell you there's a reason why people buy tickets. There's a reason why people to tune in, and it's not for good defenders. It's not for good defending. And those out there that right now that are in their cars or listening and they're screaming and yelling, going, yeah, it is. You don't know what you're talking about. No. And if it is, you are a complete anomaly out there. The vast, vast, vast majority tune in because of attacking soccer, because of goal scorers, because of creative types of players. I get that. It's why they get all the money. It's why they get all the attention. It's why, in many cases, they get all the girls, okay? I'm okay with that. That's not a problem. So celebrating that and overloading an MLS All-Star team with the people that do what is the most difficult part of the game, I'm okay with that. But you're not. And then up top, you have Carlos Vela, Brandon Vasquez, and Jesus Ferreira. You okay with that? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, all the players are.
Okay, all the players you're okay.
Best 11 caliber.
But you wanted
players.
some unsung Tyler Adams and N'Golo Kante type of player there to balance it out, so that you could actually play a game of soccer and have hopes of being successful in your MLS Best 11. Is that what you're saying? All right. Well, we can't have everything in life, Mosse. All right. Now, should we move on to Champions League?
Yes.
Okay. Where do you want to start here? The game's both on Tuesday and today, Wednesday, that we are recording here. Obviously, we can go back to Tuesday.
The group stage is in the books.
Yes, it is.
Match day 6. We'll go in order here. We'll begin on Tuesday. Porto beat Atletico Madrid 2-1. Couple of things here. With this result, Atletico finished 4th in the group, so they're out of Europe altogether. Didn't even drop down to Europa League. So Diego Simeone catching all sorts of heat for that, because this is an embarrassing showing for Atletico Madrid in the Champions League this season. Porto, meanwhile, pipped Club Brugge for first place in this group. Brugge advanced in second place. One of the Porto goals scored by Mehdi Taremi, who is an Iranian international. I'll give Eric all the credit. He was talking about him on the radio, and I do want to highlight him here. He is a very good player who leads the line for Porto. He's scored 5 goals in the Champions League this season. He's been a prolific player for them for the last couple of years. He scored 20 league goals last season, which was second in the Portuguese league behind only Darwin Núñez. And so he's a player that the U.S. is going to have to contend with at this World Cup. Also has a pretty good international scoring record. So as we've talked about, if the U.S. isn't sorted defensively there in that back line, it's not just Harry Kane. You've also got a striker here that can do some damage.
All right. Well, and remind me, though, so Atletico is not in either any tournament right now, right?
Correct.
So they will be able to focus all of their attention on losing the La Liga title, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing if it was they're at, let's see, they're at 23 points right now. Okay, so they're already 8 points behind Barcelona, 9 points behind Real Madrid. So even 1 or 2 isn't even a possibility now, despite how rested they are going to be. All right. Well, bring it on then. Bring on Iran and Remedi. I'm sorry. How'd you pronounce it?
Mehdi Taremi.
Mehdi Taremi. Okay, there we go. Bring on Mehdi Taremi and his entire Iranian team.
Also on Tuesday, Liverpool beat Napoli 2-0 at Anfield. Mo Salah and Darwin Núñez in the second half. Now, it needed to have been a bigger victory for them to overtake Napoli for first place in the group. They didn't achieve that, so these teams advanced. Napoli 1, Liverpool 2, but still a morale-boosting victory for
At this
Liverpool.
point, if Liverpool wins, it's good, right? I mean, you're not going to cry over the fact that it wasn't comprehensive or they didn't score more goals or anything like that, given especially the way the last couple of weeks have gone for Liverpool.
Yeah, weirdly, they've beaten City and beat Napoli, which has been maybe the most informed team in all of Europe, and they've lost to the likes of Leeds United and Nottingham Forest. So it's been a bit of a head-scratcher for them the last couple of weeks.
Well, we've seen teams that look completely different in their international games relative to their domestic campaign.
I will say, even though Napoli lost Kvaratskhelia, Rory Smith wrote a piece about him recently, and I sat down to watch this game just for him. In the first 10 minutes, he nutmegs Trent Alexander-Arnold twice. I mean, that guy is so much fun to watch. But all the drama on Tuesday really was in Group D, because you went into it with all 4 teams still alive for knockout stage berths. And in both games, the home team was up 1-0 at the break, and then the away team scored twice in the second half and won. So we'll start with Marseille-Tottenham. Marseille up 1-0, then Langley equalized early in the second half. And with a draw, Tottenham were already going through, but then Pierre Højbjerg scored on a counterattack virtually the last kick of the game, and that goal gave Tottenham first place in the group, which could be important. We'll see what the matchups end up being. Huge
goal. Great goal, by the way. He got rid of it and hit it off the post there and sends them to the win, and that is huge. Although they did not leave the game unscathed.
Yes, this has been a bit of a theme, unfortunately, if you've been following games the last few weeks. Players getting injured and putting their World Cup participation in jeopardy. Heung-min's son had to come off with a head injury. Looks like he's going to have surgery. It's a fracture in his eye. So, yeah, he's obviously a major doubt now for the World Cup, which would be a terrible blow for South Korea. And, he's such a likable player that, you'd hate to see that.
We saw De Bruyne last year with this type of injury, right? I think if I'm not mistaken, Sean is telling us that it took 19 days for him to come back. So this is going for the Euros. This is going to be very, very close. I guess that's not a good thing, no matter what, but it's not an extremity, obviously, that you are using. So, who knows? Maybe we see him in a shield or something like that. A World Cup without someone like Son, from a practical perspective, for South Korea, that is a big, big problem. But just from a neutral's perspective, not having the best players like Son is in the world, that sucks. And so, but again, and Mosse, I pulled up this. There's a bunch of sites now that are kind of populating every single day as these injuries go through. And we just mentioned Song. Obviously, we've talked about players for Argentina, Dybala with a quadricep injury, Di Maria, these types of players, Lo Celso, Lukaku now for a while with his hamstring. Your Brazilians over there, Richarlison and Arthur Melo, calf and muscular injury. England, Calvin Phillips, Reece James, Kyle Walker, those types of players. Chilwell, who potentially could be out too. And this is all kind of happening in real time. And again, it goes back to what we talked about, where we don't know how serious they are. They're just kind of there, and some could be more than worse. We've talked a lot about France, even though they have reloaded and they have plenty of depth. N'Golo Kante, Paul Pogba, Rafael Varane, these types of players. Leroy Sané, Thomas Müller, Manuel Neuer at different times, injuries, Timo Werner today. So it just keeps going on. Tecatito, Raul Jimenez, we could go on and on and on. Now, some of these injuries are going to clear up just because the soccer gods will smile upon them, or like I said, they were just being overly cautious and protective of not shattering their opportunity to play in a World Cup.
Now, just to wrap up, so the other match in that group, Sporting versus Eintracht Frankfurt. Sporting with a 1-0 lead at the break. Eintracht Frankfurt scored twice in the second half. They take it 2-1, so the Europa League winners from last season advanced second in that group. One other Tuesday match I do want to mention, Rangers lost to Ajax 3-1. James Sands and Malik Tillman both started, so shout out to Rangers. Lost all 6 games. And minus 20 goal difference, 2 goals scored, 22 against.
Yeah, but they're Champions League players, Mosse. But they play in the Champions League. But they're at the high level of playing at the Champions League, so they must be better than insert player here or insert player there.
Moving on to Wednesday, early, Real Madrid hammered Celtic 5-1, and they needed to win this game to top the group, which they did. Big news here is Karim Benzema came on in the second half of this game. We talked in our last podcast about players kind of milking injuries so they wouldn't risk getting re-aggravated and potentially missing the World Cup. Benzema in the last few days in the Madrid media started to get a lot of heat over that. And so all of a sudden it turns out, oh, he's fine. And he came back for this game.
He said, I think I can get away with this. I think nobody's going to say anything. And it's like, well, you're Karim Benzema. So yes, people are going to say something. And then sheepishly he said, okay, I'm fine. I'll go run around a little bit.
But yeah, Valverde, by the way, with another incredible strike. I mean, it's like every game now.
It's nuts.
Vinicius scored as well. Modric and Rodrigo from the penalty spot. Asensio. So Real Madrid had a bit of a party. And like I said, they had to win that game because Leipzig hammered Shakhtar 4-0. That meant Leipzig advance, and also it put pressure on Real Madrid. Had Real Madrid not won their game, Leipzig would have topped the group, but instead Leipzig goes through in second. As you mentioned, Timo Werner, though, did get injured in that game, so we'll see what that status is for him. That's important for Leipzig and also for Germany.
What else?
In Chelsea's group, they beat Dinamo Zagreb 2-1. As you mentioned, Chilwell got injured, so that was the sour note there. But Raheem Sterling and Dennis Zakaria scored the Chelsea goals. Pulisic came on for Sterling late, a little
7-minute
cameo.
Just cameo. That's right. Listen, just we're giving him little doses here or there as he prepares mentally and physically for, bigger fish to fry in Doha.
Milan hammered Salzburg 4-0, the other match in that group, so they advance in second place. Olivier Giroud with 2 of the goals. Stefano Pioli, I continue to say, is one of the most underrated managers. He's gotten AC Milan back in Serie A, where they're winning Serie A titles, and now he's got him in the knockout stages of the Champions League. He continues to do a really solid job there. Really, the most interesting aspect of Wednesday was this battle between Benfica and PSG for first place in this group. Both teams had already clinched knockout stage berths, but it was pretty incredible because going into it, they were level on points, and the head-to-head had canceled out because both PSG-Benfica games had finished 1-1. So PSG had a healthy goal difference advantage. They were away to Juventus. Benfica was away to Maccabi Haifa. So you figured the only way, given the goal difference, realistically, Benfica could top them is by gaining more points than them. And so once PSG were beating Juventus 2-1 in the second half, I thought, oh, well, Benfica are out of luck. But then Benfica poured on a bunch of goals late, beat Maccabi Haifa 6-1. That leveled the overall goal difference, and Benfica takes first place on more away goals scored. The clincher was João Mario in stoppage time. We had to go to about the 7th tiebreaker if you go through the list. But Benfica got it. They topped the group. PSG finished in second.
It was crazy. And, the folks over there at Paramount, which is where, we stream and watch it from, they have the Galazzo show, and it was incredible just to see them going back and forth. And well, they need 2 more goals, and then they only need 1 more goal, and it's coming, and going back and forth. It was fun. It was fun. It was against an American, right, in goal. I just want to make sure that
yes. So an American did have a big impact in the Champions League, and Josh Cohen
again, but he played in the Champions League. Mosse, he's a Champions League player.
By conceding those 6, he relegates Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar to pot 2 in the knockout.
We're going to talk more about American goalkeepers later on in the show. All right, what else, Mosse? So what are we at? Where are we at now? By the way, Gio got the start, right?
Yeah, so that we'll do that group next. So Manchester City, who had already qualified, they rested Erling Haaland and started young Julian Alvarez, Argentinian player who's going to be at the World Cup, and all he did was get a goal and 2 assists in their 3-1 victory over Sevilla. Also in that group, Dortmund, Copenhagen 1-1, and Gio, as you mentioned, came off around the 63rd minute, I believe.
All right, well, look, that's good that Gio is playing, and that's, I guess, given his history, good that Gio is not getting hurt. And so, again, we knock on wood that he continues to be stout, shall we say, for the next couple of months, given with the World Cup coming. All right, so where are we at now when it comes to the final 16, Mosse?
All right, so the knockout stage field is set. The group winners are Napoli, Porto, Bayern Munich, Tottenham, Chelsea, Real Madrid, Manchester City, and Benfica. And Pot 2, which is quite frisky, has Liverpool, Bruges, Inter, Eintracht Frankfurt, AC Milan, Leipzig, Dortmund, and PSG. Oof. So I mentioned earlier that Tottenham winning the group could be big. Actually, you look at the two pots side by side, it's not a huge difference, if we're being honest. So this is one of those years where I think we're going to end up with a lot of sexy round of 16 matchups. The draw is on Monday. I can't wait. Remember, you can't draw a team from your country and you can't draw a team from your group. So it restricts a little bit who each team can get. So people have already been playing around with the percentages. But I mean, either way, when you see teams like PSG and Liverpool in pot 2, it guarantees that some pot 1 team is going to be.
Well, we'll be able to talk about that on the show Monday. Hey, by the way, I should mention you when we were talking about Man City, and we talk a lot about young players and stuff like that. Rico Lewis, 17 years old, was on the field and started for Man City, and by the way, scored a goal. So the rich just get richer, whether they're bringing it from outside or, developing it inside. So congratulations to him. Anything else, Mosse, when it comes to Champions League?
No, that's it. So we're going to spin it forward and look ahead to some games in Europe, beginning in the Premier League. A couple of big ones there. Arsenal will be away to Chelsea. Arsenal, your Premier League leaders, they face a pretty big test here.
I mean, at some point the shoe is going to drop, I think, for Arsenal. That's what a lot of people think, all right? And maybe I'm one of them. But I'm not sure it's going to happen until after the break. And that break, for a lot of teams and for a lot of people, couldn't be worse. But Arsenal, to, again, stop this incredible run, it could not come at a worse time for Arsenal. But, again, we another good team in Chelsea that are coming up, and I still feel like each and every week that we do this is like, okay, well, now they really got to prove it. Now are they really legit? They are legit. I mean, this is a legit Arsenal team. They are going to be battling even after the World Cup break, although I think it's going to affect them. But if Arsenal, given what they are right now, were to go in and beat Chelsea, given what Chelsea are, it would not surprise anybody. And in a certain extent, at this point right now, we should expect that, right?
Yeah, I've mentioned on this podcast before, there's no player the last few years that I've talked myself into and talked myself out of more than Gabriel Jesus. And he's now gone 7 games without a goal. So it's yet again triggering this interesting debate about him. Now, the analytics crowd is rushing in to defend him and pointing out that statistically, other than goals, everything else, his numbers are bonkers, including numbers that you would never equate with a center forward and stuff like recoveries and tackles. And Jonathan Liu, who's this excellent writer for The Guardian, wrote a piece in the past few days lavishing praise on Gabriel Jesus and saying that people still don't appreciate what a great player he is. And on top of all those qualities I just mentioned, just the more esoteric stuff of making players around him better, and his energy is contagious, and he's brought a winning mentality to Arsenal. And Jonathan Liu had this great line about Gabriel Jesus. He's really a ball-winning midfielder at heart who plays a little striker on the side to make some extra money. That's how he framed him as a player.
I mean, if you're getting away with it in that you're winning, in the same way that we talked about PFOC last show right there. You go through a streak where you're not scoring and you're supposed to score. People are going to say something, except if your team continues to win and continues to do well. But again, you're taking it out of that circumstance and putting it into a national team. I know he's going to Brazil, which is a very different situation than coming to the U.S., but still, it doesn't always translate.
It just, I get all that. I get what Jonathan Liu is saying. I get what all the analytics folks are saying, but I just can't help but think, man, if this guy with all the other attributes he brings was like 10% more clinical in front of goal, we'd be talking about a Ballon d'Or candidate instead of just the very good player he is, but not a superstar.
And you don't think he'll ever develop that 10%? He is what he is.
Yeah, I mean, at this point.
Okay, well, that's a shame. I believe in him because, I believe in the good in people, and I believe that people can improve, Mosse.
You believe in Jesus.
I do. I believe in it all right? I believe in positive thinking and, sunny days and warmth and kindness and love and talent that can be nurtured. So it's going to happen in Doha for your guy.
So the other big game in England, Tottenham will host Liverpool. Liverpool, as we've talked about, did beat City. They've beat Napoli. So in the bigger games, they still kind of show up. So we'll see if that applies here. Tottenham obviously going to be without Heung-min Son, so should be a good one.
I mean, we talk about Liverpool now putting kind of all their eggs in the Champions League basket, but they can't let the home front go go too far, because then they won't even be in Champions League come the end of the year.
City will be hoping that this is a weekend where they can overtake Arsenal, because Arsenal, as we mentioned, are away to Chelsea, while City are home to Fulham. That means Tim Ream having to contend with Erling Haaland.
Oof, boy. Well, look, if there ever was an opportunity for the Tim Reed brigade out there, and there's a lot of them out there, and I even would consider myself at times one of them. But I do understand, and I will defend when it comes to someone like Tim Ream, Greg Berhalter's decision. Having said that, if he were to have a stellar game, which is not beyond him, because that's kind of what he has done certainly this year, which is why all of this conversation is around whether he is going to be named, by the way, next week on the 9th, when Greg Berhalter announces those 26 players. I don't foresee him being in that 26, but another stellar performance against arguably the best team, featuring arguably the best player, that would be a nice little feather in his cap, and yet another reminder to Greg Berhalter, and like I said, the brigade out there would get even more loud and vociferous in their support of Tim Ream being one of the 26.
And then Leeds-Bournemouth, which I'll say this about Leeds. You can't give it back now.
Exactly, Mike. Because that's what everybody's thinking, including Jesse Marsh. He's thinking we can't undo all of the good that we had last week, and he will guard against it, playing at home, because I think there was a sentiment and this feeling that was a turning point from them, in that this team that had been playing well but wasn't getting the results now played well and was rewarded in the results. And so, if you're glass half full, you're saying this is where we kick on and we use that confidence that we got from going and beating Liverpool last week. But if you come back the next week and you lose at home to Bournemouth, that is a big problem. And you're right back where you started in terms of the pressure and the chirping out there with regards to Jesse Marsh's future.
In Italy, there's a top-of-the-table clash this weekend. Napoli will be away to Atalanta. We've talked plenty about Napoli, amazing what they're doing, but I do want to give Atalanta some love. They continue to be one of the great stories in European football the last few years. They have a manager I love in Gasperini, who's been there since 2016. They've finished in the top four different times during his reign. They're in second place this season, only one loss in 12 games. They've made it to the knockout stages of the Champions League a couple times under him, so they continue to punch above their weight. Ademola Lookman's found a nice home there. He's doing well, so this should be a good one.
They cycle through players. They've made changes and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, all right, good. We don't give a lot of Atalanta love out here.
Oh, yeah. In Germany, is this the weekend that Bayern Munich finally overtake Union Berlin? Bayern will be away to Hertha Berlin, while Union Berlin are away to Leverkusen. As we talked about in our last pod, Pifak, 0 goals in his last 8 games, only 1 in the last 12, so hopefully he can get going again.
He may indeed get going, but I do think that this is the moment where they overtake him. So this is the changing of the guard that is kind of expected to come at some point.
Leverkusen, by the way, now managed by Xabi Alonso, recently took over. Another one of these great former players getting a shot.
That's great, Mosse. What do you want me to say about that?
Well, it's always a fun topic. There are people out there that think, it's unfair to guys that pay their dues. And
look, it's not unfair. Well, it's unfair in that the soccer and life is unfair, and that people are going to have additional and added advantages and opportunities than you or I or others, or you or I are going to have additional opportunities and other opportunities. And it can be relative to our background. In this case, we're talking about coaches that have played. It can be directly related and, used as the reason why you are given these opportunities. And some come good and some don't. And there will be those that have much more experience and on paper will look like a much better candidate that will not ultimately get their opportunity. But, until playing the game is completely found to be of no use from a coaching perspective, this is going to continue to happen. And it doesn't just happen in soccer. It happens in life out there. And so suck it up, Buttercup. But there's also added pressure now because of who you are as a player. And you have the potential of damaging your, now we call them brands, but, who you are and your legacy, if you will, if you come out and suck it up as a coach when you were an incredible and legendary player like he was and others have been.
And we'll end in Spain, where Real Madrid go into this weekend 1 point up on Barcelona. Barcelona home to Almeria. Real Madrid away to Rayo Vallecano. Also a great derby game in Spain this weekend. Betis hosts Sevilla. That's the most fierce derby in La Liga, so looking forward to that. So that is the weekend in Europe.
All right. Well, plenty of soccer ahead of us this weekend, including, like we said, MLS Cup. Which we will be at on Saturday, and then all of these different games that Mosse took us through there. All right, should we take a break and come back?
Yep.
All right, when we come back, we will be going and finishing up our more deeper dive into the U.S. men's national team with the 26-man roster being announced next week, and we will talk about goalkeepers. You can't live with them. You can't push them off a bridge. All right, we're back in a second. All right, welcome back. And as we have been going through the last couple of weeks, a little bit of a deep dive into some of the players and the positions, we finally get to the goalkeeping position, a necessary evil when it comes to goalkeepers, but they will save your ass. And we have certainly had times in the past from a U.S. men's national team perspective in World Cups where having a good goalkeeper has gotten us point or kept us in games, or in the case of Tim Howard, for example, come up with a historic performance even in a loss. So here are the men in our group right now that we think are potentially going to be part of what we think is going to be 3 goalkeepers. Keep in mind, again, it's 26 players in the roster here. I haven't heard any team say that they are going to go with 4 goalkeepers. I still think it's going to be 3, and that I don't think that that's crazy. All right. Zack Steffan, Matt Turner, Sean Johnson, Ethan Horvath, and we've thrown in Gaga Slonina just to kind of actually expand the conversation. All right, Mosse. I don't think that you and I necessarily differ here, and I don't think there's a lot of people that differ here when it comes to Zack Steffan and Matt Turner are both going. They are on the plane. I don't think it's even a question. They have been back and forth the starters with this national team, and I think that Matt Turner is going to start, even though, as we mentioned, he has been recently sidelined with a groin injury. But I do think that ultimately he is going to be the starter. So any problems with Matt Turner or Zack Steffan?
No, I do.
What?
I think Matt Turner should definitely be the starter. You think Matt Turner should definitely be the starter. Just about every U.S. fan I talk to thinks the same. I do wonder if Greg Berhalter, do you think 100% he's on that page?
No, I don't think 100% at all. I think that he has a soft spot in his heart for Zack Steffan. I think that he follows his own path. And like we said last show, it's not that he doesn't hear what is going on, but almost hearing a differing opinion can almost, bolster your belief that you are making the right decision. Look, I don't think that between Zack Steffan and Matt Turner there is that great a difference, other than I think Matt Turner is a better shot stopper. Okay, Zack Steffan may indeed be better with his feet, but I think he risks more, and I don't think he is as good a shot stopper. We know about the injuries that Zack Steffan has had over the last couple of years, but if everything is equal and everybody is healthy, when I talk about the equality there, it would not surprise me in the least if Greg Berhalter turns to a guy that he just seems to favor in Zack Steffan, in particular because of the way that he plays. And I do think that Greg Berhalter not only wants to be successful in the World Cup, but how he is successful is actually important to him. And implementing the system that he has, tried over this cycle to implement, I think is important to him. And having players out there that play in the way that he has set out, I think if to the extent that he can facilitate that, he's going to go with the players that he thinks is going to do it. And I do think that he thinks Zack Steffan is better suited to doing that.
Steffan this season has been playing fairly regularly for Middlesbrough in the championship. His form has been kind of up and down. Well, Turner, we know there's been a lot of talk about his inactivity. I will say we're taping this on a Wednesday. This podcast drops on Thursday. Tomorrow, Arsenal have a Europa League game. I have not seen what his status is for that. You would hope that he'd be able to play in this game. Arsenal then have a League Cup game the following week against Brighton. If he were to play in these two games, it would be 6 starts for Arsenal this season, and then the 2 he made for the U.S. in the September window. 8 games. That's not so bad. For all the talk about his supposed inactivity, just to put that in perspective by using another CONCACAF team, Keylor Navas hasn't played for PSG since May. The only match he's played over that span is that intercontinental playoff against New Zealand for Costa Rica. So that's a country that really has to worry about goalkeeper inactivity. I don't find Turner's workload this season to be that bad going into a World Cup.
In my assessment of who to play, it has nothing to do with who's playing, to be quite honest with you, for goalkeepers specifically, okay? And it's not that they can't be in form or I wouldn't rather that they're playing, but my determination when it comes to Matt Turner over Zack Steffan has nothing to do with how many games that they ultimately played. All right, number 3, I think it's Sean Johnson on the plane. Any disagreement there? And by the way, if it's all about playing Mosse, then Sean Johnson should be starting for the U.S.
Yeah, so we've established Steffan and Turner are locks, and then these 3 guys are fighting for that last spot, and you think Sean Johnson is the clear leader.
So between Sean Johnson, Ethan Horvath, and like we said, we put in Gaga Slonina because I think he will be involved. I just don't think it's going to be happening here. And there was a point where we've been talking about, because it's a 26-man roster, do you, even with the U.S., I mean, that's one thing if you're Brazil and doing this, but even with the U.S., say, hey, we're going to bring somebody that is just there for the experience, that we know is going to be involved in that next cycle, and maybe just being there and, blooding them in that time. And that would be a Gaga type of situation. But I don't think that is happening. I don't think that Greg Berhalter is, nor should he be thinking about 2026 right now. His job is 2022, and who knows if he'll be around even for 2026. So it would be between Sean Johnson and Ethan Horvath out there for a lot of people that are thinking about this. I would go with Sean Johnson. I think that Greg Berhalter is going to go with Sean Johnson.
Yeah, Horvath playing for Luton Town in the championship. Johnson obviously coming off a very strong season with NYCFC. He had 14 clean sheets, second only to Andre Blake, who had 15. I agree with you. I would strongly lean Johnson for that 3rd spot.
And look, Horvath has done well when he's been with the national team. I think he has, by all accounts, there's nothing bad in terms of what he has done or the way that he has come across to this group. So he is definitely in the conversation. But I just think that, also, Sean Johnson's been around 33. He would be maybe even the oldest player on the team when it comes to this team that's very, very young. But if you ever talk to Sean Johnson, he has this incredibly calm demeanor, very mature in the way that he thinks about the game, the way that he thinks about life. And while part of me wants to fully lean into everybody being young, I think that having someone like Sean Johnson as the voice of reason, if you will, because this young group is going to need somebody at some point that is going to be able to step up and say, hey, this is where we need to go, or this is why we shouldn't do this, or hey, this is not okay. And I think that Sean Johnson can be that voice of reason and maturity that this team has very little of. And then you don't think the Gaga thing is going to happen, right?
No.
Okay, well, we put it in there anyway, just to make it a little more interesting. All right, anything else goalkeeper-wise, Mosse?
That is it.
Well, let me ask you one thing. we remember in history the incredible game that Tim Howard had. Do you think that at some point, whoever is in goal ultimately here is going to have one of those games?
I think Matt Turner is absolutely capable. He's that good as a shot stopper. I could see him winning a game in this World Cup for the U.S. that the U.S. has no business winning, that they get totally outplayed.
Well, people forget that the U.S. lost the game that Tim Howard was so great in. So I would want whoever it is, whether it's Matt Turner or somebody else, to have a equal in terms of impact, but more importantly, to win the game.
And I will say, I might upset some people here, but I am not a Zack Steffan fan. So to me, he's the other extreme for me, where he might lose you a game with a mistake.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it comes down to goalkeeping, famous last words. If it does, that would be a pity, especially given our history of goalkeeping prowess when it comes to the U.S. team. All right, we'll take another quick break, Mosse. Is that cool?
Yep.
All right, when we come back, it's time for your questions. Oh, yes, Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi, that time in the show when you send in your questions, and you can do it either over the social media platforms out there, and keep in mind that our handles are SOTU with Alexi on all the different platforms out there, and you can use that hashtag Ask Alexi if you want, or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297. I think we got some voicemail and some Twitter questions, right, Mosse?
Yep, let's go to the voicemail first.
Hi, Alexi and David. This is Miguel from Washington, D.C. I have a couple questions for your podcast. First, do you see viable or realistic to get rid of the offside rule? In my view, it saves no real purpose. If it were to be eliminated, it will increase the goal counts, which we all love. The only thing, I think that defenders will have to be more alert, more active, more proactive. But I think that would be a good initiative. Do you see any problems with that? And second, do you know what the holdup is to consolidate CONMEBOL and CONCACAF? I think it will increase the revenue by expanding their respective markets. Not to mention, it will make both more competitive. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, what's holding that process up, or if there's anything in the works in that respect. Thank you. I love your podcast. Keep it up, guys.
Okay. Thank you, Miguel from D.C. Okay, so this is an evergreen type of suggestion. And look, on the surface, people would say, oh, what are you doing? That's impossible, right? At Miguel's suggestion of eliminating offside. First off, that has been submitted many, many times over many, many years as a possible change. And on the surface, it absolutely looks like that it would encourage more scoring and take away something that we know is controversial at different times in terms of how it is refereed. But it's one thing in theory, it's another thing in practice. And we know because at times either you have seen it or participated in it where you've played smaller-sided games without offside. It fundamentally changes the game. And it would be one thing if it fundamentally changed the game, taking away offside in the game, if it fundamentally changed it for the better. But like I said, in practice, what ends up happening is it changes it for the worse. And it actually gets much more predictable, much more boring, much more spread out. Because what ends up happening is players, obviously looking to take advantage, and now they don't have to stay on side, they're going to go as far forward as possible. And defenders, without the ability to actually pull off anybody when it comes to offside, are also therefore going to be pulled back. And so it's this great expansion that happens, and basically everybody just sitting at each end of the game. Now, when we talk about defending, one of the fascinating things about soccer is you don't have to have the ball and you can still be incredibly successful. One of the ways is absorbing pressure, okay? So we've seen teams that bunker and pull in and give up the ball in terms of possession and just deal with everything and hunker down. The same type of thing can happen in a situation like here, even if there is no offside. And so it actually doesn't necessarily encourage more goals. It actually doesn't make it necessarily much more exciting. And as a matter of fact, the entire midfield, if you will, Mosse's already talked earlier in this podcast about how romantic he is about the people that play midfield and that do the different things, whether he was talking more about the defensive side. But all of those creative type of players that at times, yes, they can work in small spaces, but also we also know are looking for the space that at times opens up because of the defensive line often. So I don't see that happening anytime in the future. But I will say, throwing out possibilities of change, even though to some it may sound ridiculous, I have no problem with. I've at different times suggested things like, I think the goals should be bigger. Okay. And people poo-poo that and scream and yell and do all those different things. The game evolves. The game looks drastically different than when it first started, both on and off the field. We know that. And there are no bad ideas, okay? Some of them we can talk about and we can come to the conclusion that, well, on the surface, again, this would be good, but it isn't necessarily. And others, maybe just their time hasn't come when it comes to changing the rules and the way that we ultimately play the game. And guess what? 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when we are long gone, the game will look dramatically different than the game that we are playing today. And who knows whether offsides will continue to last, Mosse. Before we go to the other part of the question, anything you have to say on his suggestion there?
Well, first off, I'm all for it. I've talked about it on this podcast. I would love if that tournament we had in 2016, the Centenario, became the norm. Instead of having Copa Americas and Gold Cups, we just had one big tournament of the Americas every 4 years, and that was...
Oh, you're talking about the CONCACAF CONMEBOL thing.
Oh, I thought that's what you asked.
Well, no, I just wanted... I'm asking you first about the offside thing, Mosse. Do you want to say anything? Do you think the game would be better without offside?
No, I think it's ridiculous.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I mean, in all seriousness, I've never been privy to these games, but supposedly IFAB, they have experimented with it, and they said it looked ridiculous.
Yeah, it just doesn't work in the way. All right, so anyway, Miguel also wanted to know whether there was a possibility of CONCACAF and CONMEBOL merging, and if so, is that even happening?
Yeah, like I said, I'd be for it. I guess the issue is you have all these smaller CONCACAF nations who...
but you're an elitist, and you.
Yeah, we sometimes tend to think of CONCACAF as just the U.S. and Mexico and Canada now.
Exactly.
But you have all these other smaller countries that would be left behind, and so CONCACAF has to, they're trying to grow the game in their region, and so that's the stumbling block.
Well, I do recognize that there comes a time when you have to do what is right for yourself, and so if you're talking about the United States and Mexico and CONCACAF, we all know that at times they are playing against inferior competition that doesn't do us any good, although it does the opposition that you're playing a world of good. And that if you are going to be a member, if you're going to be a part of a club, then I think it behooves you to recognize and respect and value that membership and the collective is important. And the things that you do can impact the less fortunate, shall we say. And the teams, in this case that we're talking about, teams that need more. And a CONCACAF without the U.S., Canada, and Mexico is that much weaker relative to others. And, while that tournament was great, I still see cooperation and partnerships and different times where we are involved. I don't see a coming together of CONCACAF and CONMEBOL anytime soon. And if you talk to Victor Montagliani, who's very, very clear about his responsibility to everybody. He knows we got the big dogs in CONCACAF, and he has to make sure that he is servicing them to a certain extent because they drive a lot, including a lot of money. But all boats have to rise. And that, I think, is his mandate, and that anything that is done relative to CONMEBOL from CONCACAF has to be with an eye of all of the 40-plus members benefiting from it as opposed to just a few. So good call there, Miguel from D.C. I appreciate it. What else do we got, Mosse? A Twitter question?
Yes. Eric _VBlog asking about the MLS Cup and the USC homecoming. How crazy is it going to be outside of Banc of California when that final ends?
Okay, so we mentioned this earlier. Look, MLS bobs and weaves, right? And even though it's 26 years, it still faces challenges. Is this ideal that USC homecoming is happening on the same day and in the same plot of land that the MLS Cup final is happening? No, Is it ideal that therefore there will be no parking, and whether it's us or any of the fans, they're going to have to commute in, train, Uber, busing, all the different things that happen? No, it's not ideal. And unfortunately, it's a bad look for a Major League Soccer, and in this case, the host, which is LAFC, that they don't want and they can't afford. There are plenty of people that are looking to poke holes. There are plenty of people just lined up with slings and arrows that want to, say bad things or criticize MLS for what it isn't. Okay, and then this just gives them ammunition to say, hey, your biggest game of the year on national television in this beautiful stadium in downtown, and you can't even own it relative to what's around the park. But you know what? We bob, we weave, we adapt, and in this case, whether it's the home fans or people that are coming in from outside as guests, we'll figure it out, and we'll make the best of what admittedly is not a great situation. Is it going to be crazy outside of the stadium, which is what Eric is saying? Yeah. And who knows? It might be this, you got your chocolate in my peanut butter, and I got your peanut butter in my chocolate. It's delicious in terms of the coming together of, let's say, the two footballs, if you will. And it should be fun to see ultimately what happens. Do we know who USC is playing?
They were playing California.
Wow, they're playing California.
Two other college football games I'd like to highlight this upcoming weekend. Tennessee, who were just named #1 in the first edition of the college football playoff rankings, they are at Georgia. That is an absolutely massive game. Our producer, Sean Sullivan, will be tuning into that one. And then the Michigan Wolverines this weekend at Rutgers, which is a game that always grabs our attention.
All right. Well, all right. Listen. We're going to take a break, but I want to talk to you about something here on the other side of this break. So don't go anywhere. We'll come back, and I'll give you my one for the road. All right, we're back. And when we left you, Mosse, you were explaining to me about the situation where the Wolverines of Michigan are they going to the Scarlet Knights? Or are the Scarlet Knights coming to Ann Arbor?
They are at Rutgers, which is a good thing to get away from that tunnel for a week.
Piscataway coming at you. Yeah, right? Okay, well, with that in mind, our good friend Rob Stone, he was in Ann Arbor last couple of weeks. I can't remember. And he wanted me to give you something, okay? Because he knows how big of a Wolverine fan you are. So I don't know if we can get a picture of this, but here we go. Here, so... All right, so he evidently went out to the Wolverines hockey game, all right? So this is a sweater, as the hockey people call it. There we go. I don't know whose it is, number 12. We'll get Rob to give you more information, but he wanted to give this to you yesterday on the lot, but there you go.
That is fantastic. I love this gift. So I will thank Rob the next time I see him. Yeah, I saw Rob at Yost Arena, it's called. Jenny Taft, too, showing off her skills. Michigan hockey, by the way, #1 in the country right now. They have a freshman, Adam Fantilli, who is the Erlen Holland of college hockey. The kid is a cheat code. No, this is a terrific gift.
Awesome. All right. Well, listen, you make sure that actually you should pack that for Qatar. And speaking of that, a lot of people have been asking me about preparation for Qatar. And look, I've done this now, as you have, many, many times. And I'll give you again a little peek behind the curtain. So what do I bring? I don't bring the suits that I wear, because we here at Fox Sports have the most incredible wardrobe department. I will put them up against anybody out there. And that we even have one is a blessing in and of itself. And we have already had much of our clothing already shipped over there, so they will be ready for us. And I need all the help that I can get. And the men and women down there are just incredible at what they do. So I don't take my suits. The tendency is to take as much stuff as possible, because, I'm going to be over there 6-7 weeks. I have already been to Doha plenty of times. Rest assured that there is detergent and there are washing machines, and you can certainly do plenty of laundry. I do take a guitar. That is one, of the personal things that I do. Inevitably, you will not use most of the stuff that you ultimately bring. There's the adapters and all of that kind of stuff, and the toiletries that you don't think that you can possibly get there. This is what I've found, Mosse, when it comes to a World Cup in terms of the day in and day out existence. Routine is your friend. It is a Groundhog Day type of existence, especially now with 4 games a day. And you're just ripping through every single day. And to the extent that you can get on a daily course of events and a ritual, like I said, that is really what helps you. And if and when you deviate from that, it can really, really mess you up. I'm not saying you don't enjoy the time you're there. I'm not saying that you don't see the city or see the country and the culture out there. But I'm not there as a tourist, all right? I'm there for work, and I'm there to do what I love, as you are, whether you're in front of the camera, behind the camera, and we will continue to do our work when it comes to the podcast here. If I could get away with traveling with just a carry-on, I would. It's a little bit much for 7 weeks or so that I'm going to be gone. So I'm going to have to put something underneath the plane, including my guitar. Other than that, it's the usual stuff. There's not a whole lot of strange things that I take, and it gets done. I was talking to Stu Holden earlier and Rob Stone, and they're all stressing out about when they're going to be packing, and I leave in a week basically by the time that you are listening to this. I'll just throw it all in and off we go. And it's not Timbuktu. It is Doha, Qatar, and as we said, there's plenty there. If you need something, it is right there at your disposal that you can figure out. But I'm excited, Mosse. Excuse me. I'm excited. We're getting down to it, and the packing is the least of my worries. I will have some equipment when it comes to microphones and some different things that we are doing. Our folks, whether it's Sean or others that are going to be over there, will have plenty of the equipment. So all of that is kind of taken care of for us, as is a lot of stuff. I just have to go out there and not suck. A challenge, but I'm up to it. What about you? Have you started packing?
No. I don't leave till the 14th.
But do you have an idea of what you're going to bring? I mean, you're a beautifully simple man in what you wear and what you need to survive, right?
My flight is 3 p.m. on the 14th, so that morning I'll start thinking about it.
All right. Well, listen, we will be back again next week, at which point we'll be able to talk about a lot of things, including a new MLS Cup champion. Mosse, anything to say before we go?
Yeah, I mean, our next show is going to be a blockbuster. We're going to recap MLS Cup. We can talk about the Champions League draw.
Yep.
And the Brazil World Cup roster drops on Monday. So I'll be in either a good mood or a really bad mood.
Oh, you're going to be just fine. Nobody's crying for you in Brazil, regardless of who that 26 is. Well, before we go, is there one person that you're worried is either going to be on, or one person that you're worried that's not going to be on? I mean, what's the controversy here when it comes to Brazil right now? Is there anything?
Well, there's actually interesting questions surrounding Dani Alves, who, believe it or not, at 39 years of age, is still in the picture. But he had a disastrous move to Pumas, they didn't make the playoffs in Liga MX, so he hasn't played in weeks. So there's a lot of questions surrounding him. So that's kind of one of the things I'm looking at. No, elsewhere, I think Chichi has the right idea. I like the guys he's been calling the last few squad lists I've been happy with. So, I don't think it's going to be overly stressful, but, we'll see. Well,
cry me a river.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. And as we mentioned again, on the 9th, November 9th, Greg Berhalter will announce his 26. And there will be the usual wringing of hands and consternation, but that's a good thing because it means we got a lot of different options out there. All right, we'll talk to you again next week. And until then, and as always, size the day.